Hey guys, this is Justin. Hello and welcome to another video. Today's comes at the request of Neo Fulcrum, who asks, what if the Rebel Alliance set up in the unknown regions? Now, I'm going to sort of adapt that question and ask, why didn't the Rebel Alliance set up in the unknown regions? Before we get into today's video though, I mentioned in my Star Wars Outlaws review that I would be giving away a copy of the game to sort of counter the one I was given for a review. So if you want a chance at winning the game, you can go on my Twitter, search Eckhart's Ladder, or look in the description. All you need to do is name your favorite ship, not in the original trilogy or the prequel trilogy. So Legends, Expanded Universe, sequels, whatever. Give it a retweet and I'll be picking someone soon. So back to the topic, and I've got to say, I was a little bit surprised because when reading this question, I realized we obviously knew the Alliance bases from the movies, whether Yavin or Hoth from the original trilogy, even Dantooine mentioned, or in the sequels, for example, Crate is referenced as an old Rebel base, but I thought in the lore there had to be some Rebel bases in the unknown regions. I thought there would be many, but I couldn't find a ton. And yeah, that does include in Star Wars Legends. The Rebels preferred to operate in the Mid-Rim and especially the Outer Rim, and I think that is an important point of discussion. What's the difference between the Outer Rim and the unknown regions? Well, it does vary a little bit depending on whether we're discussing canon or Legends. The unknown regions generally refers to a portion of space to the west of the galactic core. In Legends, however, according to the New Essential Atlas, although the term unknown regions refers to that area specifically in popular parlance, it's also a catch-all term for, and I quote, the galactic disk's halo of gas, dust, and stars, as well as its satellite galaxies. When the aggregate of all this territory is summed, the unknown regions can reach a volume nearly triple the size of settled space. So what kept the Alliance generally out of the unknown regions? Well, I think first of all, we have to remember the purpose of the Rebel Alliance. Yes, the Rebels were often fleeing from the Empire and actively hunted, but above all else, they were a group meant to stand in opposition to the Empire. Operating out of the unknown regions, at least as one of your primary Rebel bases, doesn't make the most sense. For one, the main benefit offered by the unknown regions purportedly would be seclusion, but all of the Rebel bases were secluded in their own right and weren't really less well hidden because they were technically in the Outer Rim. You have to remember, the Outer Rim, too, can be the edge of the galaxy, far from Imperial power. I mean, look at Hoth, but even still, distance from the galactic center is less important than the knowledge or lack thereof of the planet. The Rebels aren't going to be safe in the unknown regions if their base is public knowledge. And it's difficult to find a planet which is both livable, even just barely like Hoth, but not outright known widely across the galaxy. I did what I think is a pretty good video on why the unknown regions were unknown. There are a variety of both social and physical aspects of the galaxy, keeping that area of space honestly fairly secluded, but one of the main ones is the lack of a major hyperspace corridor like the Corellian Run or the Hydean Way, connecting the unknown regions to the rest of the galaxy. If you look up a map of the hyperroutes of the Star Wars galaxy, you'll see that there are these major hyperspace lanes, the most famous of which is the aforementioned Hydean Way, and it's these routes which make fast travel across the galaxy not just efficient, but possible. You can honestly think about hyperlanes like real-world freeways or interstates connecting cities. Assuming driving is your only option, these interstates are really going to be the only way to get somewhere far in a reasonable amount of time. Now, you don't need to live on the interstate, but for a connection to the outside world, most towns will at least be connected to a road which leads to the interstate, and that's sort of the comparison for the smaller hyperspace lanes, which will generally connect to the large transgalactic lanes. Otherwise, if you want to go to a different city, you'll be driving down side streets, country roads, through other towns, and it'll be a very slow process, and that's sort of what it's like out in the unknown regions. Without these major hyperspace lanes, travelers are forced to make a series of often poorly mapped out jumps, which can be very dangerous. So by secluding themselves in the unknown regions, the Rebel Alliance could gain the benefit of safety, but they lose the ability to respond to the Empire. They lose the ability to rebel effectively against the Empire. Think about the Battle of Scarif. The rebels determine that there's a critical moment at hand, they assemble the fleet, and they get to Scarif relatively quickly. Obviously, the movies don't worry about the nuances of travel time, which is one of my pet peeves, especially in The Last Jedi. But from a lore standpoint, that would have been pretty much impossible from the unknown regions, and you have to remember as well, the Rebel Alliance, through especially their most effective years, was relying on fast attacks responding to even momentary Imperial weaknesses, slowly grinding down the Empire by, for example, attacking a fuel station which had a temporary shortage of ships due to maintenance or whatever else. The unknown regions weren't also necessarily any safer, which again is one of the key benefits. Yes, if you find a planet there, you are more secluded from the Empire, and the unknown regions as a whole was significantly less colonized due to, again, the lack of early colonization efforts because of more prosperous hyperlanes elsewhere. But there were other major factions in the unknown regions, and many of them were just as, if not more, brutal than the Empire. The Chiss were a heavy militarized but isolationist faction within that area. They probably wouldn't do anything to you if you're just hanging out. But the Vagari were roving slavers. The Sairuvi were genocidal lizards who could steal your soul, basically. And there were many other interstellar factions which, yeah, were cut off from the rest of the galaxy, but were perfectly happy to fight amongst each other away from the rest of civilization. In Star Wars Legends, you also have the issue of the Empire of the Hand. Thrawn was dispatched by Palpatine to the unknown regions to essentially make a second mini empire in the area, performing mapping, colonization, and more. Would have been a very nasty surprise for the Rebel Alliance to run into that. I talked about this earlier, but there's also more threat associated with travel. There's the hyperspace anomaly, which bisects the unknown region. You also lack the ability to coordinate, I think, with other factions within the rest of the wider galaxy. But while the unknown regions maybe doesn't make sense for like a main rebel base or an active military base, I can see many ways you'd want to use the unknown regions to your benefit. For one, maybe a redoubt in the unknown regions where you can hide from the Empire if it gets really hot does make sense. I'm not convinced it makes a ton more sense than hiding somewhere in the Outer Rim, especially because of the difficulty of getting there, but hey. Even smarter, I think, is using the unknown regions to house production facilities, fuel stations, even shipyards. This is something the Empire did, not just with that area, but also the deep core. And this does seem to be something the Rebels occasionally did. In the short story Maze Runner from Star Wars Insider, we see Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon traveling to Firebase Alpha, which was a mining facility located in the Rishi Maze, which is technically a dwarf galaxy, a smaller galaxy orbiting the Star Wars galaxy, and thus technically within the unknown regions. You could also argue that Haven, where they meet at the end of episode 5 to regroup, is technically a location outside of the galactic plane, and thus part of the unknown regions. That's an entire can of worms, though, which depends on whether we're talking Legends or canon. I've actually covered that in a past video, which I'm sure you can find. And I mean, just practically, the Rebel Alliance was made up of many, many cells, sometimes just a couple of people big, and these would have been integrated across the galaxy, and although they differ from, major military installations, could be considered rebel bases in their own right, or at least safe houses. But that's all I've got for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Until next time, be safe, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.